You're welcome back. Now, you know, it's almost becoming commonplace to hear stories of teenagers or youth taking part in some form of indiscipline or illegal activity. This growingly common phenomenon is being described by many as youthful exuberance and political dexterity. How do we nip this in the bud? What can we do to address this rather alarming situation? Let's take a look at some of the recent issues involving the youth, which should be of concern to you and I. Not quite long ago, we brought you the horrific story of 6 teenagers alleged to have assaulted a junior high school teacher of the Salvation Army Basic School at Isiakwa. Josoma Busumpim died as a result of that attack. These teenagers are currently standing trial, and just last week, we brought you the Odumase Krobo situation where the youth took to the streets demonstrating about 3 times over electricity charges. The last demonstration is where they blocked major roads leading to the death of a 14-year-old boy. The boy shot in the police's attempt to stop the youth. Just last week, the Tumu Senior High School in the Sisala East municipality of the Upper West region was closed down. I wonder if you know why. The students went on rampage because the teachers seized their mobile phones. They destroyed school property, forcing the Municipal Security Council to shut down the school. Now, you remember the KNUST disturbances and of course, Legon and even Winneba have had similar disturbances. The list goes on and on and on. So, joining me in the studio for a discussion on this is Emmanuel Signet Asigri. He's the Chief Executive of the National Youth Authority. Now, last week, they issued a statement condemning the BGMA fracas between Shatawale and Stoneboy. Right, so that statement, of course, condemning the acts of the 2 musicians. But let's get straight into the conversation. And it's very good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time to be here with us.
Thank you, my brother.
Right, so you've put out a statement. Clearly, you were concerned about what happened with Shatawale, but it looks like a part of a bigger pattern, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think is behind it?
Well, let me say a good afternoon to your viewers and yourself. I think that this issue which we are grappling with as a country is not an isolated situation, except for the fact that I don't want to make it look as if when we are confronted with an issue, we cannot come out with solutions as to how we want to deal with a challenge we are confronted with. If you look at what is happening from the perspective of where I sit as the CEO of the National Youth Authority, I want to say that if you look at the numbers in terms of the country's demographics, the youth population has now outnumbered any other cohort in terms of our demographics.
Yeah.
The youth of our population constitute 60%. And it is not surprising that we see both positive and negative issues coming out with regards to young people who are at the forefront of these issues. But again, I think that as a country, over the period, we've tried to review some of the policies, the rules we have in terms of engaging young people. And I believe it might have contributed to what we are seeing.
In what way?
I'm saying so because if you take the issues you enumerated, I would want to first of all look at the issues to do with the students.
Right.
We have 2 unfortunate issues here, which are immediate. That is the Chebi one, and then the Tumu Senior High School incident. And as I mentioned Chebi, let me also extend my condolences to the bereaved family, and then indicate that we are following this development, and I believe as we are a country that is governed with laws, these young people have been picked up by the security agencies, and then they are taking them to due process to ascertain what warranted their meting out death to somebody who thought he was dealing with an issue which is which is legitimate.
Yeah.
With the schools, even though these two incidents are not related, but these are students who have found themselves in this scenario. Tumu Senior High School, I have followed through with the new directives and regulations our educational setup has put up within our institutes of learning, especially the second cycle institutions, which are largely where we find the senior high school students. It looks as if, and this is the perspective of the National Youth Authority, some of these policies are helping to break down law and order in these institutions. Because if you take when we were students, in the 80s into the 90s, and even before our time, you could not do the kind of things that we find students currently doing. To the extent that there have been regulations put in place where students don't even do anything to keep themselves going in terms of their own upkeep in most of the schools. I remember when I found myself in the Boko Haram in 1985, in Form 1. My house at that time was St. Mark, and I was given a flower bed to take care of the flowers within that bed. And this had to beautify the landscape of my house.
Yeah.
We were in charge of keeping the school, the whole dormitory and school surrounding clean. But I can tell you that most of the institutions now, students don't do these things.
Why is that? I mean, who made a decision?
I would not leave out my alma mater. It got to a point in time a year ago, we got so worried as to the level at which, you know, students had been allowed to live in some fields. And so all students had to step in trying to address these issues with school management. And you meet school management and they tell them, look, we are curtailed with the type of regulations we've been put through. We cannot force these students to do these things. And painfully, parents have contributed to these things. I went through a process which has shaped me and made me who I am today. Yes, I might not want to have my son or my daughter go through school and he's probably, excuse me to say, cleaning toilets. We should find a way of dealing with that. But if my house has a flower bed and we have flowers in there, we think that we need to keep the landscape of the school environment in an attractive manner and have been assigned a flower bed to take care of, either myself or with another mate of mine. This is not too much for us or for any student to do, because these things were done and we had time where you had to be doing these things. So after main school activities, you come for siesta, then after siesta, you do that before you go for dinner.
To my question though, I mean, what is behind the shift? Is it budget cuts, or what exactly is causing schools and institutions to stop this practice of giving students responsibilities that build character?
Well, if you are even talking about budget cuts, I think that when we have budget cuts, that is where we should be requiring students to rather step in and then augment for the areas where you probably would have needed to hire some hands to take care of. But if anyone is telling me that it's because of budget allocation, that is why they're coming up with this regulation, I have a different view altogether. Yes, I would not want to sit here and say issues of the 1980s, 1990s should be what should pertain now. But like I'm saying, apart from just the environment or the compound of the school, there are other things again where you cannot, do to students. You have a situation where when we were in school, if you had to go to the dining hall, you needed to dress to meet a certain standard before you are allowed in. And I'm talking of a school that is seen in terms of our ratings in this country, seen as a grade A school. And these are schools where when you go, discipline at the time was, first class. But today you go there and when it's dining hall time, students are wearing slippers, they are wearing t-shirts, they are wearing shirts and their shirts are hanging, singlets and their shirts are hanging on their shoulders and they are walking to the dining hall. At our time, you wouldn't need to even have the dining hall master or any member of staff or management to be there, but seniors would not even give you room to exhibit that type of a behavior. But like I've said, the information I have gathered, and I've done this based on interacting with school managements of some of the institutes, it's become difficult for them to manage the students now. And because the slightest thing you do, it is like, oh, you breach the GES regulations, you have to meet some disciplinary, provisions. Everyone has become apprehensive in wanting to correct students. And students are going out of school campuses without exit. Our time, you dare not. You dare not.
What's making them apprehensive? Is it parents? What is it? What's the root cause here?
From the interactions I've had with some of these managers of our institutes, they have indicated that if they have to take steps to want to correct these students, because it is made known to them that managers of these institutions cannot go beyond a certain level, they tend to put it out there to sound like this is what was meted out to me. And that's how come you find sometimes parents even having that boldness to go to school and then attack teachers who would have meted out some discipline to their wards. Right. And you see, this thing has trickled down to even our own family setup. When we were growing up, I mean, within the neighborhoods we found ourselves, you were not just the responsibility of your parents. You had the responsibility of grown-ups within that vicinity, especially where you were friends with some other family and that kind of a thing. You dare not go to the family house of your friends and then misbehave and think that because they are not your direct parents, you can do it and then walk away. Right. Discipline will be meted out, and the message you get to your parents as to what you've done, and then some more discipline will be meted out to you. And I think that as we are trying to change our way of living and adapting these lifestyles, let's look at environments where they have put these things in there and what it has brought to them. Right. If we take the Western world, these are things that, what we are seeing now, these are things that they've lived with over the years. And some of us are not surprised that we see total breakdown of law and order within these environments when it comes to their children. Right. It has become very difficult for the Western world to be able to raise their children to meet what they expect. And I have a fear that if we don't tread cautiously and we want to put this type of a situation where those who are helping to raise our children, because let's face it, Kujo, we have a situation where you are parents, or we are parents, and we spend very little time with our kids. Because, I mean, if you even have a child who is not a boarding house child and is on a school that has to, I mean, he or she has to go and then come back home and spend time with you, look at the time we leave home these days. Yeah. As early as 5 a.m., parents are leaving their homes with their children. Yeah. Sometimes you find the kids even sleeping in the vehicles. And by the time, if you have a couple who are a working couple, you find the responsibility most of the time falling on the women, irrespective of what kind of a job they do. They would have to go and pick the child from school or the children from school. And that's how come we have after school care these days. Right. Those who pick them late, you find them going home at about 8 o'clock. You are also leaving home, you are in traffic, you all get home at about an average time of about 9 p.m. What time are you going to spend with that child of yours?
Mr. Asigri, let's talk solutions. You're currently drafting a national youth policy. Tell me, are you seeking to have some of these problems solved in there?
I must confess that when it comes to these issues that I have enumerated, we have not really given it that attention. We've looked at youth development as a challenge, and then what it is that we want to do in terms of reviewing a previous document that is in place. And we have to review the document to meet the current demands in terms of youth development. And that is what we are looking at. But these issues that are coming up, we have other bodies that are supposed to be responsible for these things. I mentioned GES here. They are the ones who have given out these regulations. And I don't know what has informed some of these regulations that they've introduced into our tertiary institutions, our basic institutions where teachers are curtailed. They cannot do certain things to correct children these days. Yeah. You know. So I think that it is something that as a country we need to look at in a holistic manner where all industry players would have to come on board and we relook at it, because I think something is not working out for us. And like I indicated from my initial submission, we are dealing with a situation where numbers of the young people are outnumbering the older ones. Absolutely. Yeah. So we cannot want to see our environment or our society take up the situation in this manner. We need to look at it in a different context altogether. Right.
Emmanuel Asigri is the Chief Executive of the National Youth Authority, and as he says, the youth are now 60% of the population. This is a problem that affects us all. Right.